Hi everyone, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan and today I'll be speaking to Narayanan, who is the CEO of Avaz. Avaz builds applications for communication and language learning. They do a lot of work with adults and children with disabilities, which is particularly interesting. And I'm really excited for this chat. So welcome Narayanan. Thank you so much for making the time.
Hey, thanks so much, Roshan. Thank you.
Yeah. So to begin, maybe you could take us through the founding story of Avaz and how you came to be associated with it.
Sure. So it's almost like it's almost exactly this month in 2012 that I joined the Avaz team. So just kind of like a quick background about me. I kind of was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers back in 2007 as a software consultant, and then that's when my journey into kind of disabilities and assistive technology started. And I started volunteering in Spastic Society of Karnataka, and I was kind of like helping them look at different assistive technologies, volunteering for kids who were building some robotics using the Mindstorms NXT Lego Mindstorms kit. So that's kind of my introduction into the disability space, and then that got me really interested about how technology can empower people. And so then, based on that, I got a degree focusing on user experience and assistive technology, and I started looking up at things of what was happening in India, what other kind of like technologies were being built in this whole disability domain. And that's when I came across Ajit, who had just started Avaz at that point in time, and he was looking to ramp up into kind of like, they were kind of switching from Avaz was basically a hardware product. It was kind of like this is imagine 2012, right? So you didn't really have too many. Android wasn't that popular yet, or like that easily, like that cost that affordable rather. And then so we were kind of moving. That was the time we were moving from a hardware model to kind of like a software app download model, and that's when I joined the team in 2012. Because I was really interested in what Ajit was doing, and so that was kind of like my entry into this whole space itself.
Right. Yeah. So for those of us who are not aware of what Avaz does, can you just help us understand the product as well?
Sure. So let me give you an example of like how you and I are now communicating via speech, and I'm also using my hands and gestures and facial expressions. So these are different modes of communication, right? So a lot of children and adults, people find difficulty in communicating via speech, right? So it's basically they either have difficulty in controlling the muscles that generate speech, or there could be different reasons due to which they are unable to create speech. Now, for people like that, or for people who have children who have certain speech delays, right? So they may have a speech delay, or they may be like partially verbal, but their speech is not very clear. For all of these cases, right? So if you were able to augment their communication by providing like a basic voice support, right? So what they do in Avaz is they select certain pictures. The pictures, they represent words and concepts, and then the app speaks it out. So it's basically a way wherein if I want to say, hey Roshan, I am feeling hungry, they will tap a few buttons on the app and the app will speak it out for them. And this I am feeling hungry concept gets represented as pictures on the app. So generally people with, for example, children with autism, it's also been shown that a lot of them, they process visual cues better than just textual cues, right? So there are different kind of, obviously it's a spectrum disorder. It's like everyone is different. But at the heart of it, Avaz provides a voice. It's like if you're in a situation that you're unable to speak, say you have a sore throat and it's very difficult to communicate, you can use Avaz to do it. So that's the kind of the use case that we're looking at.
Right. So as a product and user experience person, How is it like working with this specific user group? I mean, so what are some of the nuances?
Um, so it's very interesting actually. So if you really need to, there are two aspects to it, right? So just there's one aspect as to you have to kind of obviously observe how you how the person with disabilities using your product, and then you also have in their environment, you also have the parent, you may have a special educator or a therapist. So you have to look at the user experience kind of in a kind of like an entire environment, right? So it can't not almost stand alone. So just to give you a simple example, let's talk about the user first. So one of the first times, this is a story that Ajit used to tell as well. So one of the first times that we were testing out Avaz, and this was this bulky device. So we were testing out with children with cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is a condition by which they are not able to control their muscles as easily as we are able to do. So we were showing it to a kid, and the first thing that he typed out on the device was, "I don't like this." Right. So this kid has difficulty in speaking. So we were actually very excited by that feedback because he was able to say something, right? Just because it's such a big thing to say something. So what happens in terms of like user experience is that it's kind of, you have to see that it is not only useful to them. So a lot of times people stop at, this child has a disability, so let's just give something in front of them. But that's the wrong way of looking at it, right? You and I are using apps which are like high quality, really good user experience. Why should anyone else be denied that? So we kind of have to take that barrier up and this is very common in special education and all. The apps and all are kind of very designed very in a clunky way. The user experience is almost compromised at times because you're not really catering very seriously at times. So at a user level, you give them what you would give any the same experience any typical user would get. But then what happens is that suppose you and I can touch the phone, right? So I can tap anywhere, and so because I have the ability to tap in a particular place and tap like almost without without having a I don't need a large surface area, right? I'm able to use a phone. Whereas a lot of children with say disabilities, they may have difficulty in controlling their motion, hand motion. So they may use what's called accessible switches. So Android and iOS, they support these accessibility switches. So basically, you have to then think about that user experience for them. How if a user is on a wheelchair and is using your app, so what is the visual setting that you're going to have? How far are they looking at your screen? They're looking at an iPad or an Android device, but they're looking from far. So you have to kind of build in all those a smaller kind of like more nuances, right? So what could be even looked as like personalizing settings, right? So it's basically settings plays a very important role in all our products because you can change contrast. Contrast is crucial. You can change sizes, picture sizes. You have to change access control. So that's very crucial to almost look at every single, like every user is very different. So you have to, how do you kind of generalize that for a lot of them and still provide a good user experience? I think that's so that's on the user side of things. And then you have the parent. And the parent, if you see, Roshan, what happens is that parents are super busy. Like any new parent is obviously busy and kind of have a lot of things to do. But a parent with a child with a disability, what happens is that they are trying to do many things. They are trying to understand what works for the child, and it's not always very clear. So what happens is that the parent's user experience should be that it's be very easy to use. It should be like, I don't need to like sit and process. It should not be cognitively overloaded for the parent. For the parent, it should be like, I have tried this, I understand this, what should I do next for my child. So it's kind of, it has to be very simple and easy to use.
Right.
And then kind of the special educator is almost the same thing, right? The special educator is using Avaz, our products, as a tool. So again, that comes like a more so a special educator may be catering to 10 different students. So how do you make the tool so flexible that every child with a disability is very different? The special educator is catering to 10 students. So what all you can customize in the product.
Right.
So that user experience kind of almost is to cater to 3 different people.
Yeah. So I think from a UX perspective, it's perhaps the hardest problem to solve, right? So because it's not like just another consumer app that you're building. I mean, you really have to understand the user as such, beyond what you can relate,
right?
And the fact that you have this whole care group network, and it has to be usable from their perspective as well.
Right.
And see the fact that you have all of these ecosystem experts as well, right? I mean,
right.
So I want to talk about the ecosystem part of it, right? So who are some of the people that you work with? I mean, you work with therapists, educators. Yeah. If you could talk about that experience.
So we work with a lot of speech therapists and special educators specifically. And these are, so speech therapists, for example, would use Avaz in a kind of like a therapy setting. And so let me just kind of back up a bit and tell you like what a speech and language therapist or a speech and language pathologist does. What they help is that if a child has difficulty in speech communication, they will help them with motor exercises for the mouth. That's one. Articulation. If there is a speech delay, they will help them with articulation, everything. And then more importantly, what they do is they provide the child the ability to communicate using language, right? So they may teach the child the word something like, say, want water. So the one thing is, the child has been taught want water today, but the idea is that the speech therapist wants to use this word want in multiple settings, right? So want water today, but want phone tomorrow, right? So it's going to go on. So the very essence of the word want is very crucial. So that's where the language aspect comes in. So speech therapists and like speech and language pathologists, their whole focus is that they should use Avaz and tools like Avaz in helping the child build language and communication skills. So that the child can go home or go to a restaurant and say, look at the menu and say, I want dosa today, right? So that's the one you want kind of like build. So we work with speech therapists, we work with special educators who build in, say, academic content into Avaz and helping teach academics. We also are now working with a lot of teachers and remedial teaching, where we have now products for children with dyslexia as well, where it is helping them read better and read independently. So we're working with an entire ecosystem of like special education professionals itself. And not only, so then there's this whole aspect of occupational therapists as well. So occupational therapists are a bit different from, say, physiotherapists. Occupational therapist is like basically what is a good positioning on a wheelchair, to like how do you kind of like set up the child so that they're able to navigate through a device very easily. So there are different stakeholders there, and everyone brings a role to this child's life.
Right.
And finally what happens is they create this individual, what's called an IEP, basically an individualized education plan for the child. So that IEP has multiple stakeholders, and then these stakeholders kind of come together and say, okay, you know what, for the next 3 months, this is what we'll decide for the child. This is what are the goals that we're going to work on. So everyone has a particular role to it.
Right. Okay, really sorry for the interruption. I'm just going to take a minute to talk about something amazing. Clogo helps your remote teams be more productive by helping them close decisions more faster. I've worked remotely for the last 4 months, and it's just a lot of going back and forth on Slack, on email, on Zoom, etc., but never really getting to a point of execution, right? Well, Clogo makes things a lot more simpler. You can have communication contextually around decisions that you want to make. All you have to do is open a thread on Slack like this, and continue to talk about what you want to do. With a set agenda, it could be your product roadmap, it could be a marketing campaign, it could be a support ticket, etc. And once you're done, it all syncs with your Slack, and you have all of these decisions accessible when you need it, where you need it, right? Guys, I've tried this out and it makes you super productive. If you're even remotely interested, I suggest you go to clergo.com, that's clergo.com, and check it out for yourself. Cheers. So what is the kind of impact that you've seen in your users, and what is the kind of feedback that you're getting?
So I think a lot of the feedback that comes to us, Roshan, is almost like is very emotional at times, right? So it's almost like I was recently looking through. There was a particular testimonial. I just have it actually open because. So this is one of the parents who was talking about how like her daughter's completely, like, she doesn't speak at all, right? So she fully understands everything. So I'm going to just read it out almost verbatim, right? So actually my daughter and all the rest of my family have been using Avaz for several years. My daughter never spoke in her life. She fully understands, but she's never spoken a word all her life. Since she started using Avaz at a very simple level, and it was very easy, she has been able to select very simple words to express her desires about food, mood, preferences, wishes, physical status, desired location, friends, and relatives. So basically, we finally found, so as a matter of fact, we have finally have a communication channel between my daughter and the rest of the world. It gives her a different perspective. Right. So Roshan, I think one of the things that we take for granted, right, and this is something that has always hit me very, it's always hit me hard, is that it's so easy for us to say no to something, right? Like I don't want it. Like you and I are eating something, you and I want to tell someone, no, I don't want it. That's a power we take for granted, right? You can say no to something. Now imagine you don't have a voice. You're unable to communicate. And your parent or someone has been feeding you a vegetable that you hate, but you're unable to communicate. Right? So you either have a tantrum, or you've kind of like just figured out and just coped with it and just taken it in. And then when you have the ability to communicate, you're going to say, I don't want it. Right? And this is so powerful. We have heard so many stories where parents are like, Arey, once I gave Avaz to this child, I realized that he has so much to say. He has so much to say. I really underestimated their kind of abilities. Like I thought, okay, if he doesn't say anything, doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to say. It's just that he doesn't have a way to say it. So a lot of the feedback that we get is this whole aspect of, hey, I didn't know my child could do this. My child's confidence has grown because the child can say, ki, I want this, I don't want this, and I feel like this. So they're able to express themselves, right? So there's a confidence aspect to it. Right. And thirdly, I think this whole aspect of as a anxiety for the parent as well, right? So if a parent is really worried that, okay, how's my child feeling? Because a lot of children, say specifically with autism, have difficulty in expressing emotions, right? So a lot of parents are trying to get their child to express emotions through Avaz, like feeling happy, feeling sad, hungry, all kinds of emotions. So a lot of feedback that we get from parents is that they're able to use our product to get the child to say, okay, this is what happy looks like, means this is what sad is, and this is how I'm feeling. So it's a very classic challenge with children with autism to explain this whole concept of emotions. And those are important because if a child is in pain, um, and instead of the child going off on a sort of a behavior fit because they are unable to communicate, they are able to use Avaz to communicate, saying that, "Mom, my stomach is aching," and that's extremely powerful. So because else we all talk about, or we all hear about this, like children with autism, they have behavior issues. A lot of those behavior issues come from the fact that they are unable to communicate some particular thing, and they are communicating through that behavior. But we are able to communicate through speech. They're communicating through behavior. So this whole aspect of shifting, like the impact, as you say, has been more of like, my child has grown in confidence, and my child is able to tell me what he feels, which is extremely powerful. So yeah, a lot of it is very emotional when we get to hear it.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, so a lot of the feedback is very obvious, right? I mean, because the communication is not very nuanced. You'll very quickly understand if it's working for a particular child or not, right? Whereas, I mean, if you look at product management as such, how it's usually run, it's all about metrics-driven stuff and those kind of things. I'm curious. I mean, do you have those sort of metrics for you as well? Something that we look at technically as, let's say, time spent on the app, or number of clicks it takes for them to tell something, so on and so forth. Any of these technical details that you could go into?
Yeah, surely. So obviously, we also have the metrics from a point of view of like just weekly retention and like day 7, day 15 kind of retention. We also kind of measure. What we have seen is that so for example, in the kind of like some of the way the app gets used, say in school districts in the US, what happens is that therapy sessions is weekly once, or so then your metric also changes. So the app might get used like weekly once. So it depends on how the usage is. Whereas in India, it might be slightly different because the parent is using it more frequently. So one of the metrics, you're right about like how many words they're communicating, what is their length of sentences, what are the different types of words, like are they focusing only on verbs, are they focusing only on like nouns. You kind of are able to kind of measure that, and we actually give that as an analytics offering to therapists and teachers. Okay. Right, because we want to see what has the child learned, or what is the over a period of time, what has the child's progress been so far. So those metrics are almost same as what other products do. So we do have a very kind of like focus on that, how what is the length of the engagement, how like session itself. So those are kind of like standard metrics that even we follow. I think one nuance in it is like a lot of our sessions are kind of two people sessions, right? So it's probably two people using the same device. So that's the kind of like the other nuance to it.
Right. And how has the product itself evolved over the last 7 or 8 years? And do you have other products that are in the pipeline, maybe serving a slightly different use case?
Yeah. So I think we've kind of also learned a lot over these years, because we end up working very closely with parents and therapists, collaborating with them and looking at what could be created next. So I think one of the things that we realized very sometime back was that you really needed a parent to be a very important part in this whole process, so that your intervention can succeed, right? So parent has to be empowered to well, basically they should know the product, they should know how to use it, So there's a lot of learning for the parent as well. So what we have started doing is that when we initially started, the product was completely targeted at, what, the child is going to have a speech therapy session, and then he will sit with a speech therapist, and then there'll be the session and the app, and that's it. But then we slowly started figuring out, no. Parent has to be a very crucial aspect to it. So how do you get the parent in? How do you train the parent? So what do you build in for the parent to be incentivized to keep continuing? How do you, a lot of these parents have a lot of inhibitions in the sense that they feel that they may do something wrong, or they don't know certain strategies. So we started building a lot of like basic like strategies and tips, and then resources around it, and also building it into the app itself to educate our parents. So that was kind of like a big evolution from where we started. uh, we also started doing a lot more on kind of looking at language development as well. So we launched a product called Free Speech, which was looking at how children with autism are able to develop vocabulary, right? So they're able to develop vocabulary, but grammar is a challenge. Like sentence structure and grammar is a challenge. So we've kind of built out a product that would help them play with English grammar and English sentences itself, and that's one kind of like an branching off from where we started. And what we realized then, going down the line, is that we could also build out other products for, like I was mentioning, reading, right? So looking at this whole space of dyslexia. So we collaborated with the Madras Dyslexia Association here in Chennai, and so we share a very good relationship with them, and they are the experts in this whole space of remedial reading for the last 20-25 years. So we kind of got in their what do you say, their instructional strategies, everything into an app. So what the app just very simply does is that you can import, you can take a photo of any text, be it your child's textbook, or it could be a PDF, and it would give you all the reading supports, right? So if you're a child in second grade or first grade, it would read it out to you. It could read it out in like multiple languages. And then more importantly, if you're say stuck on a word, it gives you all the reading supports, etc., for comprehension. So so we kind of slowly started looking at taking a step back and looking at how special education can be impacted in a way that is like supported by technology, but the teacher or the professional also plays a very crucial role, right? So you're kind of enabling the teacher to provide a better intervention for a child. So
Right.
so that's kind of like almost been our journey into the special ed space. And obviously there's a lot of ground to cover, because unless we're able to like provide every child the ability to learn the way they can do best, like we still have a long way to go. Like that's the
Right, right. So, as a category, I mean, do you consider special education to be the category that you want to operate in and build for, or is it language learning and communication, or any other thing that you could think of?
So we're kind of looking at special education specifically, like, because what so like just to look at it from the view of Avaz itself, right? So from the view of Avaz started off as a way for someone to communicate, right? Communicate their needs. Uh, and then if you're a 6-year-old, right? You're a 6-year-old who's not able to, who is still figuring out language. Communication is, if I give you language, you will be able to communicate, right? And if I give you language, then I can slowly build literacy. I can look at helping you learn to read, learn to write, or learn to type. So the whole idea is that it's almost, you can't remain in that one whole language space. You have to look at like special education, because academics is important for the child. What are you kind of teaching the child? So those kind of things come in.
Right, right. And I mean, everything that you do, it's so obviously good, and the kind of the way you're impacting people's lives, right? uh, how does this affect your business? I mean, isn't it sort of sometimes, I mean, isn't it easy to get sidetracked about the fact that, hey, you have to run a profitable business at the end of the day?
Yeah, no, it's you're right. It's not straightforward. I will be honest in saying that. But it is a very good challenge, honestly. Like we've been lucky, I would say, to have a certain set of investors who've been like very who've been backing us in our journey so far, believing in us, and kind of like believing in the vision that we are trying to drive. I would also say that it is a challenge, but we are also trying to be smart about the way we run the business. So we kind of try run a very kind of a frugal startup. We have I think we kind of try keep the ship very tight and look at like different ways. So, for example, just the markets that we also want to operate in, and we kind of like try and take certain bets in different ways. So it is running with the pretty same strategy that a kind of a for-profit or startup that might do in a kind of a mainstream larger scale space. But I think we kind of take a lot of small bets, maybe go into a certain country where the market is untapped, and try and capture a kind of a larger segment there. So you kind of we take slight of we kind of hedge our bets in these ways.
Right.
But at the heart of it, if you look at it, like there is so much of opportunity in India itself, where there is definitely a lot of people who are underserved, um, and really need good quality products, right? And even services, right? Not only product, but good quality services itself. So that's what we are kind of looking at. Uh, I think so. Just to add to this, Roshan, one of the things that we've seen over the past few years, and this was exactly what I was discussing a couple of days back with someone, which is that even parents now understand that the value that they get for paying something. Initially, there is a lot of debate in this whole, like a lot of conversation in this whole like disability space about charity and why are you charging for a product, etc. But you know what? If I charge for a product, that's when you're able to sustain the product. So,
Yeah.
so even everyone understands that, and we are seeing that parents are slightly also more receptive to it. They are like, okay, if I'm paying hours for a monthly subscription or for a service, I expect them to be damn good, and that keeps us also kind of like motivated and pushed, right?
Right.
So so I think that mindset is also changing,
Right.
and we at the other hand are also trying to keep up our kind of like be smart about it and kind of keep pushing the barriers and kind of like see what are the different ways in which we can add value. And if we add value, we are confident that we'll be able to kind of monetize it.
Right. So, on the same lines, what is the advice that you would offer to someone who is, invested in building for social good and building for impact and so on, right? Uh, so for anyone who's listening who wants to build a business in this realm of things, right? So, what are two or three things that the person should do?
So, if someone usually jumps into a kind of like a social entrepreneurship space, I think the one piece of advice that I have learned, and like one kind of thing that I have learned is that a lot of times passion can take you so far. You're kind of like really passionate about things, and passion can take you so far. But then you need a lot of chops, right? You need a lot of like these chops of planning, chops of kind of like working with people, working with your product. So passion is great because that will ensure that you keep learning. But you still need to be smart about planning and running it if you're looking at running it as a business, right? So I think one of the things that I have learned over my journey is that the hunger is great, but it needs to be channelized into like a proper plan and a proper execution and proper kind of metrics to kind of go back and see it. So else it's kind of, it gets dissipated very easily.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think we also in the space, if someone is looking to jump into this, I think it's a roller coaster ride, and you have to continue believing in yourself. You have to continue why you started this in the first place. So I think it's definitely a roller coaster ride of emotions and like, the kind of things that you will kind of go through in itself, right? So like with any startup, any business, so you have to also ensure that you're centered at some point in something with something.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, on some levels, I think everyone should be working on something of this sort, right? And hopefully it'll happen as we become more prosperous, I suppose. The other aspect about your business is the fact that you're a truly global company, right? So, which is that you're based here in India, you're based in the Valley. You sell in India, you sell in the US, you sell in China. So, how does that work for you? I mean, anything that you could share on that front?
Sure. So like this was again like this kind of going back to how we wanted to run a sustainable business as well. What we realized, Roshan, is that when we started developing Avaz and the kind of the first product itself, what we realized that was that we could kind of share it. We started sharing it with collaborators in the US, and we were able to match pretty much like outdo our competition there. And that's when we looked at the entire kind of like the school district system in the US and how the entire assistive technology piece works there and special education works there. So that was something that we had in mind, and Ajit was also very clear on trying to build a global company so that we'll be able to kind of put in efforts and see the product go like multiple places in the world. So to go into the US was almost like a no-brainer because they have a very solid infrastructure. They have a particular funding system. They have a particular way of like almost a law by which any child with a disability gets some sort of a technology intervention, etc. Right? So that was almost a no-brainer for us to get into. And we've been trying to be very smart about how to do kind of like how to get to our customer there. We built relationships over all these years. We are able to see like we kind of build very close, almost like beta testing communities there. We do certain conferences, certain strategic conferences there. So those are the things that we built our business and reputation in the US. And a lot of it is like community building, like we have done in India. We've done the same thing in community building in the US. With respect to the other countries, like for example, even in Europe, was almost, it started off as a happy coincidence, and then we could see that we could create create impact. So Ajit met the lady who runs the Autism Society of Denmark, the largest autism body in Denmark. And she was like, why doesn't our country, Denmark, have anything like Avaz? So she asked us, she collaborated with us to create a very kind of like a Danish version of Avaz. And now Avaz is the largest selling product in that space in Denmark. And like we started seeing that it like gave us a lot of like confidence in ourselves that we were able to scale to like different countries and like do much better than competition. And it also made business sense for us, right? So not only were we kind of like trying to grow in India, work with governments in India, work with parents, special educators, schools, but also like scale to Europe and look at like offering. Some of our language learning products, we kind of went into China as well to look at like language learning, English language learning in China as well. So that was kind of our whole global kind of like push itself.
Right. So, and another, very obvious thing is the amount of technology depth that you have, right? Which is that Ajit, the founder, is an MIT guy. I mean, he's got probably 25 patents, and you are from Georgia Tech as well. So, are you particularly excited by how technology is changing right now? I mean, is it enabling some things that were previously impossible for you?
Absolutely right. So just to give you an example, like when we started back in 2012, um, Android devices or Android phones or Android tablets, for that matter, were really hard to come by. Good quality ones, right? So you would end up. We've kind. I don't know. We used to test it in our office, and none of those would really match the standard for us to kind of ship it in India. And then the iPads were super expensive.
Mm.
And iPads, so like if you look at the technology itself, right? Like for the example, for the iPad, they were robust and they slowly built in a lot of accessibility layers over a period of time. They always had pretty good, like Apple itself has done a lot of great, like has done a really good job in accessibility. But over a period of time, they've taken the kind of bar higher as well. So just to give you an example, they have with their new AR kit, they have this whole eye tracking, they have head tracking. So imagine you're a person with what's the kind of like a locked in syndrome, and you aren't able to move your head, or you're able to move your head, but you're not able to move your hands. So you can basically use your eyes or use your face to control an iPad, and that is something which is kind of like a game changer for a lot of people, right? So a lot of people with cerebral palsy, for example, don't have hand motion control. So those are the kind of like exciting things in technology. Obviously then there is a lot of new things, even be it like with machine learning and the kind of like the whole aspect of how something like machine learning can enable people with disabilities, or how something like natural language processing. So a lot of like the entire free speech, the grammar engine that we were talking about, that has a lot of NLP built into it to enable people to create sentences. So there is excitement generally. As a team, we are kind of very driven by a lot of like excitement with technology and product. So that's I think what has really changed over the period of years is how different, like also like different consumer technologies are slowly making things more accessible, right? So be it your Android, be it your iPads, they're making it much more accessible for people to use, people with disabilities to use. And that's a great step. And then new technologies as well, which enable us to create something which is useful, right?
Right, right. So on that same note, what are you optimistic for going forward? I mean, what are your plans with Avaz? So I think you're an 8-year-old company at this point. What are the plans for the next 8 years?
Right. So I think so. Just to give you an example of what we started doing at the start of this pandemic was that we built an entire teletherapy angle into Avaz itself, wherein you can. So since you mentioned technology, we built in something which was like a Skype plus TeamViewer within your app itself, within the iPad itself. So it helped a therapist who is maybe sitting in Chennai connect with a client sitting in, say, Delhi, and control their device, give a therapy session, everything from within the app itself, right? So this was kind of also looking at a lot of school districts in the US who are facing the lockdown time, who are facing kind of issues with delivering therapy. So what we also realized over a period of time is that product plus services is kind of also an important aspect. So you have the product, but you also need to provide services, the services wrapping, and you need to work with a lot of special educators and speech therapists to provide that entire package to the parent, to the student. All right. So almost the next 8 years, if you look at it, like where we want to go is to build a very solid kind of like a offering, right? So be it product plus services offering for people in this space, like for parents, looking at kind of children with disabilities, children with in the special needs space itself. So uh, and when I say a services plus product offering, it's almost like you are
you're investing in a community, basically.
exactly you're building that ecosystem, right? So you're building that ecosystem, and that is what is kind of like. So if you look at the disability community itself, a lot of parents advise other parents, right? It's always like we have a community, we have like a WhatsApp and a Telegram community. A parent posts a question, another parent is almost like 90% answer gets answered by a parent most of the time, right? So you're building a community where you're building an ecosystem where you can get in a speech therapist who's qualified, who knows how to work patiently with children. You get a special educator who is great in bringing in academics for the child. So you're kind of creating an entire package of sorts, and that's what we want to offer parents, and which we also believe will impact the child in getting to their kind of like best potential, right? So that's because of every parent is wanting their child to like get to their best potential. So that's the whole direction that we want to go towards.
Right. So before we let you go, for anyone who may be interested in, say, special education or social impact, entrepreneurship, etc., what are some books and podcasts that you would recommend?
Books and podcasts.
Are you a big podcast person as such?
I'm a very big podcast person. I really enjoy podcasts, but actually I try and do kind of like sort of non-work, non-tech kind of podcasts in a way. Maybe not non-tech. So for example, my favorite is kind of like Radiolab. I'm like a big Radiolab fan. It's an I kind of recommend it to anyone who is just starting off with podcasts. Because it's like a very beautifully it's an art of storytelling that they've kind of nailed. So and then there is obviously 99% Invisible, which is kind of talking about design. They kind of cover design in different aspects, be it architecture, be it kind of like painting and other things. So kind of I really enjoy the storytelling in that.
Right.
Now you've taken me down the podcast route. So I'll give the top by third recommendation would be I don't know if you heard The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green.
No.
So basically they're not at all necessarily tech podcasts at all. So Radiolab does a lot of politics plus science. 99% Invisible does a lot of design. And the Anthropocene Reviewed is basically this guy, John Green, the author, who wrote Fault in Our Stars, and all. So John Green's, so he does a review of basically the Anthropocene, which is this human, us humans, and he kind of takes various aspects of our human lives and rates it on a 5-star scale. So it could be as simple as rating. What did he rate? He rated Taco Bell. He rated other some like simple things, but he brings in a lot of like depth and simplicity in that, and it's very beautiful. It's like the way he speaks is like something that you are. Oh, this is wonderful. Yeah. So, but from a book angle, I think the one book that I really enjoyed was Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About
Happiness. Yeah.
I think that I keep going back to that book.
Yeah.
I think that was a really kind of like a book for me to kind of learn and kind of understand. So I think that book is something that I would highly recommend.
Yeah, so I have this theory that book kind of discovers every person, every founder at a particular point in time,
Mm-hmm.
It's got that aspect to it, I feel. I kind of read it at a point when I had to read it.
Right,
So,
you're right. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. So, all right, this is wonderful, and continue doing all of the great work that you guys are doing. It's amazing that people like you exist, that Avaz exists. Thanks so much for your time again. It was great talking to you. So
Thanks so much, Roshan. Thanks for hosting me.
thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. The podcast will be available on all popular platforms. If you like this episode, then don't forget to share and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and take care.